Call the meeting to order. Good afternoon. And welcome to the December 2013 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 2 items for your consideration and 2 presentations. First, you will consider a report and order that takes critical steps to improve the reliability and resiliency of 911 networks nationwide. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to revise outdated rules and provide airlines with the ability to permit passengers to use mobile wireless services via onboard airborne access systems. Third, you will hear a status update on the Technology Transitions Policy Task Force work toward making near-term recommendations related to the Commission's expectations and role in the IP transition. Last on your agenda today, you will hear an update on FCC and industry efforts to promote mobile wireless device unlocking. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Rear Admiral David Simpson, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Before we move to this item, I just want to recognize some folks related to this who are in the audience who deserve recognition, if anybody deserves recognition. Bernard Buster Brown, the President of the Board of NENA, the 911 Association, as well as NENA CEO Brian Fonts and Regional Director Ed Marecki. Steve Soter, the Director of the Fairfax County Department of Public Safety Communications. Jeff Cohen from APCO, and representatives of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, the Virginia Information Technologies Association, and the Maryland Emergency Number Systems Board. Thank you to all of you for how you watch out for our safety. We appreciate it. It's my pleasure to introduce now the new Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. We are very fortunate to have Admiral Simpson making his rookie appearance here, his rookie at-bat at the FCC. He may be a rookie here, but he is a pro, and the caliber and stature and experience and abilities that Admiral Simpson brings to this job, we're grateful for his dedication and look forward to him applying those abilities. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler and Commissioners. And while I'm a rookie at bat, I'm surrounded by a league of veterans, so very honored to present this issue to you today. We present a report and order aimed at protecting the safety of life and property by improving the reliability and resiliency of our nation's 911 networks. Reliable access to emergency service communications is an enduring value Americans expect. However, the changing nature of communication networks utilizing newer technologies in some cases has threatened the continuity of a generally improving trend of 911 access. As many of you remember, in June 2012, a powerful windstorm called a derecho caused great damage to communication networks in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic portions of our country. Most alarming, the storm caused more than 3.6 million Americans in 6 states to lose some level of 911 service for periods ranging from several hours to several days. The breadth of these outages was vast and the effect troubling. At least 77 911 call centers exhibited some level of loss of service, and 17 had no 911 service at all, leaving millions of residents without access to or significant delays in emergency assistance. In response, this past January, the Bureau issued a report on the underlying causes of these failures and recommended Commission action in several key areas to improve 911 reliability and prevent such outages in the future. As we noted in March, when the Commission adopted a notice of proposed rulemaking in this docket, a 911 call can make the difference between life and death, particularly in a disaster like the derecho. Extended outages like those we experienced last summer are unacceptable and should be avoidable. They call for the Commission action to ensure that the public can rely on 911 when it is needed most. Unfortunately, purely voluntary efforts, like those the Commission has promoted to date, have proven inadequate to assure public safety authorities and the citizens they serve that their 911 networks are designed and maintained to be ready in likely emergency conditions. Although the Bureau has publicly reminded 911 service providers of the importance of following industry-developed best practices, the derecho revealed too many instances in which this guidance was implemented inconsistently or ignored completely. And while we are encouraged that the service providers have taken steps to harden their 911 networks in the wake of the derecho, our experience has shown that more rigorous oversight is necessary to ensure that those improvements continue on a nationwide basis. This report and order requires providers of core 911 capabilities to take reasonable measures to provide reliable service in 3 key areas: circuit diversity, central office backup power, and network monitoring. Covered 911 service providers must demonstrate compliance with this requirement through an annual certification that they have implemented specific best practices or reasonable alternative measures in each area. Many service providers claim to already meet the objectives of this certification, and we expect any incremental cost to be modest but worthwhile. The certification will highlight the most vulnerable areas and focus remediation. The report and order is designed to maximize flexibility for 911 service providers and account for newer network technologies while responding to the legitimate public expectation for robust and resilient 911 service during stressing events. It sets the stage with a baseline level of reliable 911 service using current network technologies that will also ensure that next-generation 911 networks continue to provide equal or better availability while delivering greater resiliency during disasters. It also establishes a framework to identify 911 readiness, shortfalls, and track industry efforts to remediate the most significant issues. The report and order also amends and clarifies current Commission rules on the responsibility of covered service providers to notify 911 call centers in the event of a network outage. The current rule is open-ended. These changes will ensure that first responders receive timely information within 30 minutes of a carrier's discovery of an outage, so they can continue doing their jobs while service is being restored. This item represents many months of hard work by Bureau staff, and we appreciate the coordinating efforts of many people throughout the Commission. I would like to give special thanks to our Deputy Bureau Chief, Lisa Folks, who kept this item on track, as well as Priya Srinivasan, whose enforcement background was a great help in developing the item. The leadership of the Bureau's Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability Division, Jeff Goldthorpe, Lauren Kravitz, and Michael Connolly, who brought engineering and legal expertise to this project, as well as John Healy and his group for helping us all better understand the nuts and bolts of the 911 infrastructure. I also want to thank Eric Bash and the Enforcement Bureau, as well as Bill Richardson, David Horowitz, and Larry Schecker in the Office of General Counsel. I would now like to introduce Eric Schmidt, an attorney in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, who will present the report and order in more detail. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners. I'm pleased to present today a report and order adopting rules to improve the reliability and resiliency of 911 communications nationwide. This item responds to serious, but avoidable, weaknesses in the nation's 911 infrastructure revealed during the June 2012 derecho storm. It represents more than a year of work by staff across the Commission and a major step toward ensuring that all Americans have access to reliable and resilient 911 communications. Our review of the record in this proceeding produced several key themes. First, 911 is not just a communications service, but a vital public service that saves lives and improves emergency response. Second, while voluntary best practices have often been effective in improving the reliability of many commercial communications, they have not always been adequate to ensure the level of reliability that we have come to expect from critical 911 networks. Even when there is broad consensus that a best practice is a good idea in theory, it must be implemented in practice and on a consistent basis to be effective. Finally, while all 911 networks should be held to high standards of reliability, the diversity of technologies, service providers, and service areas in the nation shows a need for flexibility in how those standards are met, particularly as legacy networks evolve into next-generation 911 networks based on Internet Protocol architecture. The Bureau sought to incorporate each of these principles into the item before you today. The foundation of the report and order is a rule requiring 911 service providers to take reasonable measures to provide reliable service in 3 key areas: critical 911 circuit diversity, central office backup power, and diverse network monitoring. These are vital topics identified in the derecho report, and best practices developed by industry provide guidance on reasonable efforts in each of these areas. This rule applies to covered 911 service providers, defined as entities that provide 911, enhanced 911, or next-generation 911 capabilities, such as call routing, location or number information, as well as the functional equivalent of those capabilities directly to a 911 call center. Under current network configurations, this definition extends mainly to incumbent wireline carriers. It does not apply to communication providers that merely allow customers to originate 911 calls, to government entities that provide their own 911 service, or to providers of text to 911 capabilities and other emerging technologies. Covered 911 service providers must demonstrate compliance with the reasonable measures requirement through an annual certification that they follow specified best practices or reasonable alternative measures to mitigate the risk of failure. If a service provider conforms with every element of the certification, it is deemed to comply with the reasonable measures rule, and it need not provide further information. If a service provider relies on alternative measures, it must briefly describe those measures and explain why they are reasonable under the circumstances. Service providers may also certify that certain elements of the certification are not applicable to their networks, but they must explain why. In both of these cases, the Bureau will review their certifications and accompanying explanations on a confidential basis, work collaboratively with service providers to resolve vulnerabilities, and, if necessary, order appropriate remedial action on a case-by-case basis. The report and order sets forth specific certification criteria based on best practices developed in cooperation with industry through the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, or CISRIC. With respect to circuit diversity, covered 911 service providers must certify annually that they have audited the physical diversity of critical circuits serving each 911 call center and tagged those circuits to prevent inadvertent loss of diversity between audits. Based on those audits, the service providers must either eliminate all single points of failure in their critical 911 circuits, or if that is not feasible in a particular location, explain reasonable alternative measures to mitigate the risk of failure. With respect to backup power, covered 911 service providers must certify whether they provision adequate backup power to maintain service for at least 24 hours in any central office that directly serves a 911 call center. We estimate that this requirement applies to approximately 1/4 of all central offices nationwide. For several hundred especially critical facilities that host a selective router, which distributes 911 calls across an entire region, the certification specifies at least 72 hours of backup power. Service providers must also certify whether they test and maintain backup power equipment in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications, design backup power generators for fully automatic operation and for ease of manual operation if required, and that they install backup generators as standalone units that do not depend on the operation of another generator for proper functioning. If any of these requirements is not feasible in a particular location, the service provider must describe reasonable alternative measures to mitigate the risk of failure. Finally, covered 911 service providers must certify annually that they have audited the physical diversity of their aggregation points for network monitoring data in each 911 service area, and the monitoring links between those aggregation points and their network operations centers. They must either eliminate single points of failure in their monitor networks, or if that is not feasible in a particular service area, explain reasonable alternative measures to ensure reliable and resilient network monitoring. The report and order also amends the Commission's existing outage reporting rules to clarify the responsibility to notify 911 call centers of major disruptions in service. Under the amended rule, covered 911 service providers must contact the 911 call center within 30 minutes of discovering an outage and follow up no more than 2 hours later with additional material information about the nature and scope of the outage, as well as the estimated time for repairs. In light of untimely and inadequate outage notification during the derecho, we believe these changes will make the rule more clear, more enforceable, and more likely to provide 911 call centers with useful information. The ongoing implementation of Next Generation 911 may eventually reduce the need for Commission oversight in these areas, but it may also require consideration of new and different approaches to ensuring 911 reliability. Accordingly, the annual certification rules provide for a Commission review in 5 years to determine whether they are still necessary and effective. Based on the current record, however, we are confident that this report and order helps fulfill the Commission's responsibility to promote the safety of life and property through wired and radio communications by ensuring that all Americans have access to reliable and resilient 911 service when they need it most. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congress made public safety a fundamental purpose for creating this agency almost 80 years ago. It also passed laws in 1999 and 2008 that authorized us to promote emergency 911 services throughout the country. So whenever the FCC identifies significant problems with these vital services, we should not hesitate to address them, and by adopting this order, the Commission takes necessary action to improve the reliability of emergency networks. The 911 problems which this order addresses came to our attention at a time when we could at least afford them. During the June 2012 derecho, one of the most disastrous storms our nation has experienced. Even though it lasted less than a day, the storm resulted in 22 deaths, widespread damage, and millions of power outages across the several Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states. The derecho also impaired the ability of millions of Americans to access 911 services and left certain areas without 911 for several days. The Commission thoroughly investigated and reported on why these service outages occurred. The staff reviewed more than 500 network outage reports and interviewed 28 PSAPs and representatives from 8 communications providers. What the staff found was that with regard to a number of service providers, 911 service disruptions were due to companies failing to have adequate plans and systems in place during storms and other inclement weather events. In other words, these failures could have been avoided if these providers had followed industry best practices developed by CISRIC, our Advisory Committee on Network Security and Reliability. Because addressing these concerns should be a high priority, I circulated a draft order to improve the reliability of these networks with 4 core requirements that our staff recommended in its report. 911 service providers must audit the physical routes of their networks, ensure physical diversity of monitoring links, require a specific amount of backup power at central offices, and give PSAPs more information when and where service outages occur. I wish to thank Chairman Wheeler for placing this order on today's open meeting agenda, and I'm grateful to Lisa Folks, Jeff Goldthorpe, Eric Schmidt, and the other talented staff members who contributed to this excellent order. I join others in welcoming Admiral, retired I see, David Simpson to the Commission. I congratulate you on your appointment as Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and I wish to also thank David Tereski for his contribution to this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenworcel.
During the summer before last, a fast-moving storm known as a derecho blew through the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic. These were not the usual warm winds of June. These were gusts of up to 80 miles per hour. They were accompanied by sheets of rain and bolts of lightning. The damage left in the wake of the derecho was substantial. This was Mother Nature at her most angry. We had downed trees, blocked roads, power outages, and serious failures in our communication systems. To learn more, in the days following the derecho, I visited the 911 Center in Fairfax County, Virginia. Steve Souter, who's with us today, the head of Fairfax County's Department of Public Safety Communications, described an eerie quiet in the aftermath of the storm, as calls into 911 quickly and implausibly ceased. He said he knew instantly something was wrong. He was right. In fact, during the derecho, as we've heard, 77 public safety answering points spanning 6 states lost some connectivity. This affected more than 3.6 million people. 17 911 call centers lost service completely. This left more than 2 million people without access to 911 during and after the storm. It was many hours before the calls returned, and in some cases, days. This is unacceptable. It puts the safety of too many people at risk. So it was clear we needed an investigation, because when things like this happen, we have to search out the facts wherever they may lead. Then we need to apply the lessons we learned, not just in the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, where the derecho struck, but everywhere. The staff at the Commission has done extraordinary work to understand what happened. They worked with carriers, reached out to public safety officials, and combed through lots and lots and lots of paper. As a result, we now know that as many as 9 generators failed to start, disabling hundreds of network transportation systems. We know that backup generators and switches failed. We also know that power failures undermined network monitoring capabilities. So, we understand what did not go right. Now we're doing something about it. The rules we adopt today require 911 service providers to adopt practices for auditing circuit diversity, to supply backup power to central offices that serve 911 call centers, and to provide diverse network monitoring. We also direct providers to reach out to 911 call centers and let them know when they experience a service outage, so first responders are not left in the dark, unable to do their job, and help us when the unthinkable occurs. These are simple, common sense solutions, but they matter. Because this is not just a conversation about technical fixes. This is a conversation about real people and their safety. So I am grateful to the chairman for making this a priority so early in his tenure. Thank you also to the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for your continued diligence. Your efforts have my full support.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, want to start off by welcoming Admiral Simpson to the bench. Your service on behalf of our country has already been extraordinary, and we are grateful to you that you have decided to devote yourself to the work of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau here at the FCC. We look forward to working with you in the years to come. I also want to thank those in the audience who spend every day keeping us safe. I've had the opportunity to meet with many of you, including Steve Sauter out in Fairfax County, and it is no small thing to keep the people safe in moments of harm. When our citizens call 911, they expect and deserve to reach emergency personnel. Making that happen for each and every 911 call is not easy. Unlike normal calls, a consumer's provider, whether a traditional telephone carrier or a wireless operator, a cable company, or an over-the-top interconnected VoIP provider, cannot simply transmit a 911 call to a destination based on the number dialed. Instead, that provider must transmit the call to a selective router to determine which public safety answering point, or PSAP, should receive the call. Then, it must determine how to connect that caller to that PSAP. The PSAP, in turn, queries an automatic location information, or ALI, database to determine the location of the caller so that emergency personnel can respond immediately. PSAPs themselves purchase communications services from 911 service providers, all under the oversight of state governments. Notably absent from this arrangement is the FCC. We do not establish 911 service tariffs. We do not negotiate 911 service contracts. And we do not collect or distribute 911 funds. Instead, Congress has given us a supplementary role when it comes to 911 service providers. We are charged with, and I quote, working cooperatively with public safety organizations and industry participants to develop best practices for network diversity requirements, call handling in the event of call overflow or network outages, and certification and testing requirements, unquote, for services to PSAPs. For years, the Commission has carried out this statutory duty through its Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, the aptly named CISRIC, and its predecessors. CISRIC has developed and maintained best practices for network reliability and disaster preparedness. Most service providers have claimed that they voluntarily follow these best practices. And unsurprisingly, many PSAPs have relied on these promises in evaluating their service. The 2012 derecho storm that swept across the mid-Atlantic states revealed an important flaw in this voluntary scheme. Although some 911 service providers claimed to follow best practices, their performance during and after the derecho confirmed that they did not do so consistently. Because these providers' claims of compliance were never formally made to the Commission, we had little authority to take action against those who had broken their promises. Given this background, the Commission needed to take steps within its power to correct the situation. For example, we could have required 911 service providers to formally certify whether or not they comply with industry best practices. This would let PSAPs know which providers do not conform to best practices and enable PSAPs to take corrective action. This would also make providers' promises enforceable and enable the Commission to sanction those filing false certifications. As a second step, we could have required an across-the-board audit of critical 911 circuits so that all 911 service providers, and crucially their customers, the PSAPs, could identify weaknesses in today's 911 service infrastructure. To be clear, I would have supported today's item had we taken just these steps, and I proposed many edits to align this order with that vision. But today's order goes a hop, skip, and a long jump further. For example, while the order claims to adopt a certification scheme, it in fact adopts extremely prescriptive and mandatory standards. Take new Rule 12.4b. This rule requires 911 service providers to, quote, take reasonable measures to provide reliable 911 service. Sounds anodyne enough, in theory. But in practice, it gives the Commission carte blanche to fine 911 service providers that do not comply with whatever particular practices the Commission might demand. As such, a 911 service provider must comply with new federal rules, such as annual diversity audits. It must do so even if that information reveals nothing new to the providers or to their PSAP customers. And it must do so even though across-the-board annual audits do not come cheap. They are likely to cost the industry anywhere from $8.96 million to $22.4 million each and every year. Another problem is that the order claims to leave network design decisions to PSAPs and 911 service providers, but instead delegates plenary authority to the Bureau to, quote, order remedial action on a case-by-case basis to ensure the reliability of 911 service. In other words, the Bureau could order a carrier to redesign its network, to purchase new equipment, or to deploy new facilities. This level of micromanagement, even if the Commission were equipped to carry it out, is neither appropriate nor effective. We at the Commission have not had the experience with network facilities sufficient to make this judgment. Indeed, the experience reviewing the performance of 911 networks after a single storm that affected barely 1% of the country's PSAPs does not qualify us to second-guess the negotiated agreements of thousands of PSAPs and their 911 service providers nationwide. A third and final problem with the order is that it imposes burdensome regulations that, in my view, stray far beyond CISRIC best practices. For example, best practices currently require only, quote, periodic, unquote, diversity audits when called for by network design, and advise providers, where appropriate, to design networks to minimize the impact of a single point of failure. The industry is implementing these practices with audits every 2 or 3 years, in part because other best practices, such as circuit tagging, help prevent the need for more frequent audits. Against this backdrop, the NPRM in this proceeding stated that circuit audits should occur every 2 years and were only, quote, necessary for roughly half of these PSAPs because that is the portion likely to be served by more than one selective router. But the order goes much further. It requires annual audits of every 911 circuit in this country. Now, this will obviously burden 911 service providers, but ultimately, our nation's PSAPs, and hence taxpayers, will bear these costs. For service providers, like most other businesses, generally pass on such costs to their customers. Shouldering these additional costs may make some PSAPs think twice before investing in innovative approaches to reliability, such as adopting next-generation 911. And ironically, it is not the PSAPs that serve large suburban areas that are most likely to suffer these costs, but rather those that serve rural areas and tribal lands, flood-prone bayous, soaring mountain communities, and the remote Alaskan bush. Those PSAPs must confront how to allocate scarce resources every day. And if a commission-ordered network redesign costs so much that a PSAP reduces the number of operators it employs as a matter of necessity, the consequences could be dire. In sum, I completely understand the urge to take action, and I share that vision. Some 911 service providers did not live up to their commitments in the derecho, and accountability is necessary. But the people these providers failed are their customers, the PSAPs, and those Americans who could not reach emergency services in a time of need, not us in the federal government. And it is the PSAPs, the states and municipalities that oversee them, and on-the-ground first responders, not the FCC, who must be empowered to take the lead. For all of these reasons, I respectfully dissent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pye. Mr. O'Reilly.
I, too, want to welcome the new chief, and I want to extend my thanks to former Chief David Turetsky. He and his team diligently and extensively briefed me on this item early in my tenure here at the FCC. I have been sincere in my comments that I want to find common ground with my colleagues so items can be approved unanimously. We have an obligation to try to work together for the greater good. Sadly, this is one of those instances where the gap was too wide to bridge. It didn't have to be this way. The safety of our nation's citizens is not a partisan issue. I take a backseat to no one in trying to ensure Americans are protected in the times of need. In fact, everyone supports a fully functional and reliable 911 system, especially during major catastrophes. When people's lives are at stake, real life and death matters, our communication networks need to be ready and able to meet the challenges. The question becomes, what's the best way to make this happen? I proposed several edits and supported changes proposed by Commissioner Pye that have narrowed the rules while still meeting that goal. While I appreciate some small changes were made, the key suggestions of both of us were rejected. One of my requests was to minimize the burdens on so-called good actors. Let's be clear. I am a strong proponent of strenuously enforcing the Commission's rules. However, we should try to find a way to lessen the burdens over time on the good actors, communication companies whose networks and services are continually operational and meet the Commission's requirements. In other words, do they have a clean checklist, and are there alternative measures if necessary, ensuring reliable 911 service year after year? This seems immensely reasonable in light of the requirement that certifications be filed annually instead of biannually, as was the case in the original draft. After a couple certifications, we ought to know those companies that go the extra mile for compliance and probably don't need to be scrutinized on the items rubric of a never-ending yearly certification scheme. My idea of a waiver process to ease the burdens for good actors was rejected without much debate. My support for a waiver process is not because I support the free market and less regulation, which I do. It is because I know the compliance costs are going to be passed on to consumers, including the struggling families deciding whether to keep phone service, that are going to pay more each month for unnecessary regulations. The Commission has found a way to drive up consumer costs by burdening truly good actors for no real benefit. I'm equally troubled that my simple proposal to replace the vague, non-committal review of the newly imposed rules in 5 years, a review that is not mandated to be completed, was also dismissed. For too many years and too many situations, the Commission enacted rules with no mechanism to fully and faithfully determine in the future whether such rules will be retained or modified. Accordingly, I proposed a variety of sunsetting mechanisms to ensure that the Commission would have to revisit these 911 reliability rules in order to preserve them. I even went so far as to propose that the Commission or the Bureau could extend the rules if the certifications and other relevant data showed that there was still a need for the rules. As incredible as that may seem, this was rejected due to a review that the provider should have the burden to request a rulemaking to show that the rule should be eliminated. I disagree. What became clear through this process is that there is a great resistance to sunsetting commission rules. For those that want to explore real FCC process reform, let's start there. For these reasons, I dissent to this order. Sadly, this was a missed opportunity. It was well within our grasp to reduce a 5-0 vote. Despite my dissatisfaction, I thank the staff for all of their hard work. It's on to the next item for me.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to pick up on the other observations that have been made by my colleagues about Chairwoman Clyburn and her leadership on this issue. In so many ways, the things that we are dealing with recently have been things that were shepherded along by Chairwoman Clyburn, and we appreciate your leadership on that. I also want to second what everybody has been saying about David Tereski and in his leadership in bringing this along and passing it off to Admiral Simpson. And it was a non-trivial undertaking and a significant contribution that David made to the entire process, for which we're incredibly grateful. I have a statement for the record, but let me just summarize briefly. I have been continually referencing what I call the regulatory seesaw, which is always accompanied by this motion. That where the industry acts responsibly, there is less need for regulation. Act well, no need. But where the industry fails to do what it was supposed to do, the seesaw trips the other way. And this is the case today. 911 backup systems did not work during the 2012 derecho because of a failure to observe industry-developed standards. And as a result of this, lives were threatened, and the safety of the people was threatened. The first section of the Communications Act talks about this agency's responsibility for public safety. We take that seriously, and that's what this order does. As we've all indicated, public safety officials throughout the country are here supporting this action. We want to support you. We appreciate what you're doing on the front lines, and we'll now go to a vote on this order. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay.
The ayes have it, and the order is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the next item will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. It is entitled Expanding Access to Mobile Wireless Services on Board Aircraft.
Okay, John, you leading the dance?
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Roger Sherman. Oh, wait a second. I'm not Roger Sherman. Roger had a sudden cold and has a cough, so I'm filling in for him. How convenient. But I'm John Leibovitz, Deputy Chief in the Wireless Bureau, and it is my pleasure to introduce this Notice of Proposed Rulemaking that would propose to update the Commission's regulations regarding the use of mobile wireless services and devices on board aircraft. As will be described in more detail by Wireless Telecommunications Bureau staff, today's NPRM would be the start of the Commission's process to collect technical information and other details from the public about this issue, so that the FCC staff and Commissioners can review and understand all of the technical and policy considerations before making any final decisions. In summary, the proposal would retain restrictions on in-flight mobile device usage, but would harmonize our rules to cover all mobile spectrum bands and implement a comprehensive framework that would allow airlines to voluntarily opt in to offering in-flight mobile services. Staff of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, in coordination with the Office of Engineering and Technology, has examined the technical basis for our current rule and recommends that the Commission consider whether the existing prohibition makes sense in light of significant technological developments as well as experience of other countries around the world. As Secretary of Transportation Fox noted in a statement earlier today, the FCC has said before their sole role in this issue is to examine the technical feasibility of the use of mobile devices in flight. We believe the U.S. Department of Transportation's role, as part of our Aviation Consumer Protection Authority, is to determine if allowing these calls is fair to consumers. U.S. DOT will now begin a process that will look at the possibility of banning these in-flight calls, and as part of that process, U.S. DOT will give stakeholders and the public significant opportunity to comment, end quote. These proposals are consistent with the Commission's longstanding commitment to facilitate universal broadband access, promote investment and innovation, and encourage efficient, flexible use of spectrum. I thank the talented and highly skilled attorneys and engineers across the FCC for their contributions to this item. I'm joined at the table by Julie Knapp, Chief of OET, Brian Regan, Legal Advisor in WTB, Roger Noel, Chief of the Mobility Division in WTB, Linda Cheng, Associate Chief of the Mobility Division, Paul Powell, an attorney in the Mobility Division, and Amanda Hutink, an attorney in the this statement is becoming an attorney in the Mobility Division. In addition to the team at the table, I would like to thank Tim McGuire for his technical expertise and all the other talented and highly skilled attorneys and engineers across the FCC for their contributions to this item. And of course, we'd all like to thank Roger Sherman for his leadership. Welcome to the FCC, Roger. Amanda will present the item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am pleased to present to you the Mobile Wireless Services Onboard Aircraft Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. The item before you today would expand air passengers' access to mobile wireless services while in flight by proposing to revise the Commission's regulations regarding such use. Current Commission rules, which were designed to prevent harmful interference to wireless networks on the ground, restrict the in-flight use of mobile devices operating over certain wireless frequencies. The restriction is narrow and inconsistent among all spectrum bands, and it does not reflect the fact that today it is possible to use mobile devices on board aircraft without causing harmful interference to wireless networks on the ground, as long as an aircraft is equipped with onboard equipment that can manage cellular connections. The notice proposes to revise the existing restriction and to harmonize rules for the use of mobile devices on airborne aircraft across all mobile wireless spectrum bands. Specifically, the notice proposes to explicitly forbid in-flight connections over wireless networks unless the aircraft is equipped with appropriate onboard equipment. The proposals in the notice would give airline operators the ability to offer mobile wireless services above 10,000 feet while providing them with the tools to effectively manage the airborne use of mobile devices and mitigate potential harmful interference to wireless networks on the ground. This notice would not require any airline to offer mobile wireless services aboard their aircraft, and airlines would be able to choose whether to offer data, texting, and/or voice services, or none of the above. Under the proposal, the provision of mobile wireless services onboard aircraft would be prohibited unless an airline chooses to take two affirmative steps to enable the service. First, the airline would seek FCC modification of their existing Part 87 aircraft station license. Second, in order to provide services onboard an aircraft, airline licensees would be required to use an airborne access system to manage in-flight use of mobile devices to avoid harmful interference with wireless networks on the ground. The airborne access system would provide wireless services to devices onboard the aircraft and would route mobile wireless traffic to networks on the ground via satellite or air-ground connections, the same method that is used today to connect onboard Wi-Fi systems to networks on the ground. In addition, the use of mobile devices on airplanes and the onboard equipment used to provide such services would continue to be subject to the Federal Aviation Administration's rules and regulations, as well as individual airlines' policies and standards. Internationally, jurisdictions within Europe, Asia, and Australia have authorized the use of mobile communication services on aircraft using airborne access systems. Building on available research, as well as the deployment of such systems internationally, the notice seeks detailed comment on the technical requirements necessary to enable the use of airborne access systems in the U.S. market. The notice also asks about any potential operational issues related to the use of airborne mobile services, including voice, on aircrafts. The notice represents another important step in the Commission's ongoing efforts to increase in-flight broadband wireless services and provide consumers with meaningful competitive options while protecting wireless networks on the ground from harmful interference. The staff recommends that the Commission adopt this notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Proposing rule changes so consumers can benefit from advances in communications technology is one of the Commission's core responsibilities. Currently, the FCC prohibits certain cellular communications services on aircraft to guard against the threat of harmful interference to terrestrial wireless networks. However, over the past several years, we have seen the development of airborne access systems that use picocells in a network control unit to minimize potential interference. This technology has now advanced to the point where providers can offer mobile services on planes while protecting aviation safety. The item before us today stands to promote competition for mobile broadband services on planes and creates an environment in which interested air travelers would no longer be left with only one option for data service currently allowed by any particular airline. Allowing other wireless companies to compete with available in-flight Wi-Fi services could lead to lower prices and better quality data options for flyers. Initiating a rulemaking today, I believe, is the best way to create an appropriate forum for the wireless industry to provide thoughtful comment so that our staff can carefully examine the engineering and licensing issues necessary to deploy competitive options. As we know all too well, the announcement of this notice of proposed rulemaking was met with some strong reaction based on the belief that these proposals from the FCC would automatically lead to a rash of annoying phone conversations on planes during flight. As the item explains, however, our proposed rules would not require commercial airlines to permit voice calls. In fact, the airborne access systems give commercial airlines the capacity to prevent voice calls and provide data services only. So I am confident that commercial airlines will continue to monitor the debate and determine if they should simply continue to limit their passengers' use of this technology to only quiet or data services. Now, I admit up front that when I am traveling by rail, I strive to be among the first in line to the quiet car. However, it is my opinion that this robust debate about mobile phone call etiquette in flight should not stop the FCC from removing unnecessary and outdated technical rules that could provide consumers with safe, competitive options for mobile broadband service while traveling by air. If enough members of the consuming public oppose voice calls during flight, I expect that the airlines will hear that opposition and govern themselves accordingly. So I'd like to thank the fine team led today by our in-house comedian John Leibovich, Julie Knapp, and of course the rest of the team, and to welcome Mr. Sherman, who has a cold, to the agency. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworth.
More than 2 decades ago, the Commission adopted rules prohibiting the use of cell phones on commercial and private aircraft. These rules, specific to the 800 megahertz band, were part of an effort to promote safety and prevent harmful interference. Today, the Commission begins a rulemaking to reassess this prohibition. In this rulemaking, we ask many questions about the use of cell phones on planes, including for voice calls. As a matter of principle, I believe it is good to ask questions, even the hard ones, so I will concur. But make no mistake, I do not like this proceeding. because I believe as public servants we have a duty to look beyond these four walls and ask ourselves if our actions do in fact serve the public. When it comes to authorizing voice calls on planes, I think the answer is a resounding no. We are not just technicians. Whatever bureaucratic desire we have to harmonize our 800 megahertz spectrum rules does not absolve ourselves of the consequences of our decisions. If we move beyond what we do here today and actually update our rules to allow voice calls on planes, we could see a future where our quiet time is monetized and seating in the silent section comes at a premium. But worse, given the anger this proposal has generated and the negative response of so many of those who work on planes, I fear our safety would be compromised. This is not acceptable. I fly a lot. I am a regular resident of the last row and middle seat. I know what it is like to have the person in front of you pop their seat back, leaving you scrambling to hold on to your drink, hold on to your reading material, and hold on to some semblance of peace. It is not easy. This commission does not need to add to that burden. I, for one, will not. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like most Americans, I fly coach. Each year, the seats feel a little bit smaller and my legs get a little more cramped. The airlines charge fees to check luggage, which fuels a mad rush to find space for your carry-on bags before packed flights. Going through airport security, that's a whole other set of hassles and indignities. In short, airplane travel these days is often stressful and unpleasant. As a result, I was not surprised to be bombarded with emails as soon as it was announced the FCC would vote on a proposal that could allow passengers to make in-flight phone calls. Many of these messages were quite colorful. One person wrote, quote, "It's bad enough being herded like cattle on these planes without having to listen to boorish idiots have needless conversations on their cell phones." Another said, and I quote, "Being stuck next to a gabber on a 6-hour flight to San Francisco, I fear what I'd do with my cutlery." A third wrote simply, "No!" And those were just messages from my family, so you can imagine how many more I got from others around the country. Although I'm pretty sure that I could resist the urge to stab my fellow passengers. Pretty sure. I understand these sentiments and I share these concerns. Like most Americans and like some of my colleagues here, I do not want people making phone calls on planes. But given the task before us, our decision is to determine whether or not such use of the nation's spectrum is consistent with the public interest standard outlined in the Communications Act. In my judgment, today's proposal is not in the public interest, and I must respectfully dissent. My principal objections are twofold. They relate to the proposed licensing framework and concerns about public safety. First, licensing. The licensing framework proposed in this item sets an unfortunate precedent when it comes to spectrum policy. Wireless carriers have spent tens of billions of dollars, both at auction and in the secondary market, to purchase spectrum licenses. These licenses provide carriers with exclusive use of specified frequencies in specified geographic areas. Today's proposal, however, would infringe upon carriers' exclusive use licenses. Through administrative fiat, airlines would be licensed for free to use the same frequencies that are currently licensed to carriers. However, the NPRM cites no precedent for taking such action, nor does it answer important questions such as, can anyone use a carrier's licensed spectrum so long as they're pretty sure they won't cause interference? With a series of spectrum auctions on the horizon, I do not believe that now is the time to cast doubt on the scope of such licenses. Additionally, I suspect that neither we nor the airlines will find the proposed licensing framework workable or appealing. Under the approach set forth in the NPRM, I do not see how it would be possible for an airline to allow passengers to make telephone calls unless it also chose to become a commercial mobile radio station, or CMRS carrier, presumptively subject to the wide range of obligations and regulations that apply to such carriers. We, therefore, may have to comb through our rules and decide which ones should apply to airlines that are CMRS carriers and which ones should not, and come up with a persuasive explanation for each and every decision. These burdens on the agency and airlines alike are unnecessary. So rather than proposing only one particular framework, I believe we should have proposed multiple approaches or just sought comment on them without favoring any one in particular. For example, we could also have proposed spectrum leasing, a tried and true method which respects carriers' exclusive use of licenses. Or we could have proposed altering our base station rules so that carriers could contract with airlines to place cell service on board. Or perhaps there's another approach that could work, from auctioning sky licenses to unlicensed use. In any event, I believe that it is premature for us to endorse one and only one specific proposal today, especially the one that is contained in this item. Second, safety. The NPRM, in my view, does not adequately address public safety and national security concerns. Being annoyed at a chatty passenger during a flight is one thing, but flight safety is quite another. And while today's item maintains that, and I quote, issues of onboard security and safety of flight are matters primarily reserved for the FAA, unquote, to me, the other issues at play in this proceeding are relatively trivial by comparison. Back in 2005, when the Commission was considering a proposal similar to this one, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Homeland Security told us that there were, and I quote once again, public safety and national security related concerns that stem from the Commission's proposal, unquote. However, their specific concerns are mentioned nowhere in today's NPRM. For example, these federal law enforcement agencies told us that our proposal could make it easier for terrorists to coordinate hijackings or detonate remote-controlled improvised explosive devices aboard aircraft. Echoing recent comments from flight attendants, the agencies also voiced their opinion that the Commission's proposal could lead to more air rage incidents, which would pose difficulties, to say the least, for air marshals who are supposed to be anonymous, if possible, during flights. Before coming to the Commission for my first stint in the Office of General Counsel, I worked at the Department of Justice, where I concentrated on counterterrorism policy. One lesson I learned there was the necessity of close interagency coordination when it comes to protecting the American people. I was therefore surprised and disappointed to learn that the Commission did not engage and consult in a direct dialogue with federal law enforcement officials prior to the circulation of this proposal. I'm also disappointed that the item does not specifically propose or mention the recommendations made by law enforcement officials back in 2005 to mitigate public safety and national security concerns. If we do not specifically ask about those proposals here, I'm concerned that we will not have a sufficient record to address those concerns, and we will not have sufficient legal notice to include necessary measures in our final rules. That won't serve anyone well in the end. In sum, I've often said that it is important for the Commission to update its rules to reflect current technological and marketplace realities. So, while I believe that there are many other rules on our books that cause more harm and deserve our attention, I'm sympathetic to the argument that we should allow the Federal Aviation Administration or individual airlines to decide whether to permit phone calls aboard aircraft. Open to moving forward with the rulemaking, I carefully reviewed this item and offered a number of suggestions for improving it. Unfortunately, most of my suggestions were not accepted, and I cannot support the proposal that remains. For these reasons, I respectfully dissent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
I have just a very short statement. I associate myself with the statement of my friend from Kansas, Commissioner Pai, in dissenting on this notice and incorporate his substantive comments by reference. Nonetheless, I thank the staff for the hard work on this item. Julie Knapp is a valued asset, and I thank him for his time and energy. I really appreciate your insight on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So let me be clear. First of all, let me do something. I I recognized the public safety representatives in the audience. There are an awful lot of people out here wearing wings as well, representing flight attendants. We want to recognize your presence here today and thank you for coming and your participation in this activity. So thank you very much for being here. But let me make clear what's going on here. Nothing will be different on your flight tomorrow. We're seeking comments on a proposal. And the reason why we have a specific proposal, not a laundry list of things like some have suggested, is so that those comments can be focused on a specific issue. So that, for instance, those who are concerned about the impact on Homeland Security can focus on a specific rather than spread their comments across a broad area. Those who are concerned about the impact on spectrum policy can focus on a specific. So what we're doing today is saying, here is a proposal. We ask you all to come, and we want you to know specifically what you should be commenting on. There is oftentimes an inconsistency between the laundry list approach and the ability to allow people whose information you're seeking to target their information. But let's be specific about what's going on here. This proposal maintains, in fact expands, the interference protection rule that has banned usage in flight for over 20 years. And that rule will not change. But there is a need to recognize that there is a new technology that will not apply, that means that the rule does not have to apply if the aircraft has this new technology, because that technology itself prevents the interference that was the original rule was designed to eliminate. This is a technical rule. This is a rule about technology. This is not a rule about usage. I associate myself with Commissioner Clyburn and her riding in the quiet car on the train. That's what I do too. And I don't want to listen to the personal conversations or the business deals of a person sitting next to me on a flight. But this is the Federal Communications Commission. Our job is to be the expert agency on communications rules. And if technology eliminates the need, eliminates interference, and therefore eliminates the need for an interference protection rule, then we ought to eliminate the rule. If this new technology is permitted, you will be able to email, text, surf the web if an aircraft has the new technology installed, and the new technology has the capacity to block voice calls. So I'm very heartened by Secretary of Transportation Fox's announcement today that the Department of Transportation is beginning a proceeding on the issue of banning voice calls. But you won't be able to do texting, email, web, unless we deal with this issue here. I agree with Secretary Fox's statement that the FCC's, quote, sole role on this issue is to examine the technical feasibility. With this order, we move forward with our responsibility, just as other agencies move forward with theirs. And let me make one thing clear, that without this proposal, you would not be able to text, to email, and to surf the web, and that the DOT, the Department of Transportation, is going to address the behavioral issues. We're cutting away the technological underbrush in behalf of consumers and competition. So, we'll go to a vote. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay. No.
The ayes have it. Madam Secretary, the request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you very much to the Bureau for your presentation and your work on this. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, next on your agenda today is a presentation by the Technology Transitions Policy Task Force with an update on their work towards making near-term recommendations related to the Commission's expectations and role in the IP transition.
So while everybody is getting settled, and while we're calling out rookies, since Roger Sherman was unwilling to come to the table and submit himself to the rookie call out, we do want to call out John Salet, who is joining us as acting general counsel and has been working on this task force since arriving. Speaking of a pro, Mr. Salet, it's over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to present today a status report on the task force work. I'm joined at the table today by Henning Schultz-Rinne. I told you I was going to mispronounce your name. I apologize. Our Chief Technology Officer, Julie Veach, Chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, and Jonathan Chambers, Chief of the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis. I do want to make clear at the outset, though, that the four of us sitting at this table represent a much larger effort that's included all the bureaus, all the bureau chiefs, and a number of people who've worked on this hard for a year now, including under the leadership of Chairwoman Clyburn earlier this year. We thank all of them. We especially thank Stephanie Weiner, who is in the Office of the General Counsel and who's been essential to today's work and will be essential as we go forward in January. This process began, as you know, with petitions filed by NTCA and AT&T at the end of last year. It was followed up with a public notice in May of this year, which has garnered a great deal of comments. Today we're going to give you a sense of what we've heard and what we believe will happen next, what we intend to offer you for your consideration at the Commission meeting in January. Henning will begin by explaining what we mean when we talk about technology transitions, and we mean it in the plural. Julie will describe what the task force has learned to date. Jonathan will describe the kinds of targeted experiments and ways of learning that we will propose. And then I will suggest the path forward leading to your consideration of an item at the January meeting. But before we do that, I want to emphasize the principles that will guide the task force in its work going forward. Our objective at this moment is to learn how the technology transitions will impact consumers. We're going to do that in a number of ways. For example, through diverse experiments from, we hope, multiple, perhaps many, different providers in many parts of the country. We're going to learn about it through open data initiatives and other forms of research. Of course, to be effective, we need to act quickly. We need to be smart about what we learn. We need to make sure we have the information and analysis that the Commission needs when you proceed to the larger policy and legal questions that await the Commission's agenda. And of course, we need to be guided by our fundamental mission to preserve and enhance the enduring values of the network, values that include public safety, as Commissioner Rosenworcel talked about this morning at the congressional hearing, public safety, universal access, competition, and consumer protection. And we expect that this framework as well will inform the item that we will present to you for consideration in January. Henning?
Thank you. Technology is part of our title, so it is helpful to talk a little bit about what transitions we are actually discussing. One part of the difficulty that we encounter in the discussion is that people tend to focus on one of the three large transitions that are going on. So let me summarize briefly with three major things that have been happening but are now combining to fundamentally change what we perceive as the core underlying communication infrastructure that we all rely on, both for our day-to-day needs as well as for public safety, business needs, and others. We have a three-layer problem. Indeed, network engineers are well familiar with the notion of layering as a fundamental principle of the Internet. And the transition affects all three primary layers that we deal with. At the bottom, it affects the physical layer, one that actually transports bits across the landline infrastructure in the United States and elsewhere. While we've had a mixture of such technologies for a while, copper was the dominant one for the primary service voice. However, now we're moving in an environment that has a much more diverse set of transport technologies, including fiber, coax, wireless, and indeed copper, now used as a means to carry bits and packets, as opposed to just a TDM circuit-switched stream. In the middle, we have a notion of a transport infrastructure that serves to carry a diversity of applications, both voice and data, as well as specialty applications. Traditionally, those were TDM circuits set up to carry a voice call and later also data services, as well as remnants of analog services, particularly at the edge of a network. Those have and are continuing to transition to a network consisting of IP packets, which provides us with a flexible, universal delivery mechanism for all kinds of services. At the top, we have had TDM voice as the core infrastructure that we all could rely on. It was the foundation for early Internet access via modems, for new services at the time, like fax, for important services like TTY, for access for people with disabilities. That is now transitioning both on wireline networks and on wireless networks to a voice over IP-based infrastructure provided by a variety of parties, both the classical providers as well as so-called over-the-top providers. Thus, we have a fundamental reworking that now changes not just the technology, but our assumptions what the technology can do and should do. This has been going on for a while, but we're now seeing that essentially the shift has been where this is becoming the dominant technology as opposed to a supplementary technology. This raises the challenges that we'll be addressing in our effort going forward.
Thank you, Henning. So, what have we learned? The transitions Henning just described are ongoing and will continue. Industry has already poured billions of dollars into IP infrastructure and has plans to invest billions more. Modernizing communications networks catalyzes further investments in innovative services, thus powering economic growth. We welcome this investment and the benefits it brings, but there are complex legal and policy challenges that must be addressed. So what have the people told us? The Commission has already gathered a robust record. For example, we received over 400 comments in response to our December 2012 and May 2013 public notices. In addition, we have many other active proceedings that focus on issues related to the tech transitions. The record supports opening a proceeding to conduct experiments to examine consumer impacts, but not legal or policy questions which would be informed by but not decided as, part of these experiments. In addition, stakeholders urged the Commission to protect core values, such as public safety and disabilities access, in any approved experiments. Certain natural experiments already illustrate these themes. For example, following the damage caused by Hurricane Sandy, Verizon replaced many copper lines with fiber optic cables in wire centers in New York and New Jersey, and proposed replacing wireline services with wireless in limited areas. The discussions surrounding these natural experiments highlight the impact of ongoing changes to consumers, businesses, competition, and the importance of regulatory oversight and processes that facilitate public involvement. What about AT&T's petition? Well, in its November 2012 petition, AT&T requests that the Commission initiate a proceeding to solicit proposals for limited experiments that would allow for the technology transitions to be evaluated incrementally. Specifically, AT&T's proposal calls for providers to submit detailed plans for conducting these experiments, identifying such issues as where the experiments should be held, what steps are planned to transition the legacy network to new technology, how customers would be notified, and a timeline for the proposed changes. Before authorizing any experiment, the Commission would seek broad public comment. It would then consider the proposals, the comments received, and the values of the network compact before announcing its decision. In its decision, the Commission would act under Section 214 and other sections of the Act or our rules as appropriate. And now Jonathan will share our thoughts about a different set of experiments.
Thank you, Julie. In addition to seeking comment earlier this year on AT&T's petition to conduct a trial, we also sought comment on a diverse set of experiments and data gathering efforts. One way to think of this is the AT&T trial was geographic in nature, and the experiments and data gathering efforts that were also proposed were some of which were functional in nature, such as looking at numbering databases, and others looked at the effect of the transitions on certain populations. So the effect of the IP transition on persons with disabilities, the effect on older Americans, the effect on persons who live in rural and high-cost areas. Now, in the coming weeks, we will work with your offices to propose which of those earlier experiments and data gathering efforts we're going to suggest the Commission adopt at its January meeting. So for now, I would just like to talk a little bit about the principles, the way in which we're going to go about our business. For one, while we have significant interest and significant authority in each of these areas, we don't always have the requisite expertise to conduct experiments, to conduct research, to know how to reach out to the academic community. So we're going to work with other federal agencies. We're going to work with states. We're going to work with a variety of folks, academia, in order to move forward with these experiments. And today, I'm pleased to announce that we have concluded a memorandum of understanding with the National Institute on Aging, which is a component of the National Institutes of Health. That MOU will be signed later today between the chairman and a person who's with us, I hope, in the audience, the Deputy Director of NIA, Dr. Marie Bernard. NIA will lend to the Commission its expertise on the effects on aging. And for the Commission's part, we'll lend our expertise on how relay services are used, because for the Commission, the touchstone here is access for persons with disabilities, access through relay services. Now, this work builds upon work done earlier this year under Chairwoman Clyburn's leadership and the support of Commissioner Pai and Rosenwurzel, when the Commission adopted video relay service reform. In that reform order, the Commission authorized research and development into making the relay services more efficient, more effective, into the use of technologies that will help the consumer experience and also help the administration of the program. So the MOU today is the first. As far as I know, it's the first of its kind for the FCC, but it's just the first. We're going to enter into MOUs with other federal departments and agencies. As the Commission asked us earlier this year, we are working on an MOU with the National Science Foundation. As I said, we're going to work with a diverse set of others because this transition that we're talking about is bigger than any one company. It's bigger than the FCC. It involves all of us. And we intend to engage as many different interests, as many different parties as we can to help us with our work, to help us gather our data. Now, as we gather our data, we are going to do so in an open and transparent process. We're going to do so in a way in which not only will we collect the data openly, but we will make the results of our data collection efforts open and accessible to the public so that others can analyze the data. We're going to conduct our business that way, and we would encourage all of those who are going to propose trials to also, while protecting privacy, while protecting personally identifiable information, to make their data open to the public so all persons can analyze the data that's collected as we move forward. And with that, let me turn it back to John, who can talk further about how we are going to move forward.
We are working toward an order for your consideration in January. Let me sketch out some of the principles that will inform our work, which you will see and pass upon before and at that meeting. We're working on an order that would do the following. It would invite on a rolling basis service-based experiments with short timelines for submission. Let me just drill down on that sentence for a minute because there's a lot packed in there. By rolling, we mean we will start off with short deadlines because, as, for example, Commissioners O'Reilly and Pai have emphasized, the need for speed is considerable. So we'd like to get going. But this is not a trap for the unwary. If people want to come in later with more experiments, we want to have as many people as possible. So we will recommend that we process them on a rolling basis. Secondly, service-based. By service-based, here's what we mean. We mean trials where real customers buying real services will see those services transition to IP. And that means, for example, Mr. Chairman, you were asked by Chairman Emeritus Dingell this morning at a congressional hearing whether the order to be considered in January will include geographic trials. Yes, a geographic trial is a kind of service-based experiment, but it doesn't have to be limited to geography if providers want to take a different view as well. At the same time, we expect to establish criteria for those experiments, including the service-based experiments, that focus on consumer impacts, include the enduring values that were identified earlier in the presentation, and will create a speedy process for public comment and commission evaluation. In other words, we're envisioning a process by which there's an invitation, a short time later a proposal, a time for public comment, also speedy, and then the Commission would pass upon the experiments and presumably authorize or amend them so they could go forward. We also expect to recommend to the Commission actions to support the kind of targeted experiments and research of which Jonathan spoke, and we will describe suggestions about how to conduct observations and data collection initiatives of the kind he also described. And finally, we will describe to you a process, and let me emphasize a process, not a policy, for creating a managerial framework, because there are going to be many different proceedings that are touched by the IP transition and many kinds of legal and policy issues that, although not decided within the experiments, will be informed by experiments and other forms of data collection. So we will, in January, suggest you a timeline that, if you adopt, will lead to a framework by which staff will come to you over the succeeding time period and tee up issues as you instructed them to be teed up. That will be the basic approach we take. Obviously, in the time between now and the sunshine notice for the January meeting, we would very much like to hear from people who are interested in the experiments with their thoughts about how these questions should be answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, John, and I think that's the perfect ending there to say that we're very much interested in hearing, particularly from the people who are on the dais here, about these thoughts. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, and allow me to join the chorus in welcoming Mr. Salat to the FCC. Thank you all for the presentation. Technology and technical advancements have truly transformed lives. And for consumers with disabilities, these transitions have opened many doors. Texting, face-to-face video, and services such as Video Relay Service, or VRS, have removed barriers to communications and are enabling on-par exchanges. So it pleases me to learn that the Commission will be building on the VRS order with the signing of an MOU this afternoon with the National Institute on Aging regarding joint efforts to research the effectiveness of relay services for older adults with hearing disabilities or deafness. I am very excited about the future, as it holds incredible promise for the delivery of innovative services, higher capacity speeds, and the introduction of next generation 911 with features such as video calls, which should provide more reliable and redundant public safety networks. At the same time, I remain committed to ensuring that this Commission stays true to those core values embodied in the statute, to promote competition, to protect consumers, to advance universal service, and to promote robust and resilient public safety networks. Technology transitions, along with their challenges and opportunities, are not new. They have taken place continuously throughout the last century. As these transitions have occurred, the FCC's commitment to the public interest has remained constant, even as policies change to reflect the times. So I'm particularly pleased that the task force's principles for action include a commitment to protect these fundamental principles. The challenge now is for the Commission to determine how best to modernize rules to encourage innovation and investment, while at the same time advancing these core values. I am pleased that the Chairman is moving ahead with trials to help inform us on how to update our policies. If structured properly, trials could provide the Commission and the states with considerable insight on how to reform our policies. As we evaluate our next steps, I will keep a keen eye on how these transitions and proposed reforms impact consumers and competition. The Commission has an opportunity to facilitate innovation, particularly in the area of Next Generation 911 and for persons with disabilities. The recommendation about proposed research and development on the impact of IP transitions on persons with disabilities is a great way for the Commission to gather data and develop appropriate policies, and I look forward to working with the Chairman and my fellow Commissioners to make sure this occurs.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Software developers often code sandboxes into their programs. This code allows others access to a portion of the program without harming the host platform. It provides an opportunity to experiment within the program, minimizing risk, before introducing ideas at a broader scale. Sandbox thinking is popular among startups in Silicon Valley. But why not put it to work in government in Washington? After all, testing big ideas in a small way is a good way to understand the consequences of our policy choices and the impact they have on consumers before unleashing them in the world at large. The IP transition strikes me as a terrific candidate for the sandbox. The movement from analog technologies to IP-based communications is big, so experimenting on a small scale is smart. We can test our ideas about next-generation network deployment and expose them to real-world conditions. Better yet, let's do it in location-specific trials and service-specific ways. Let's also do it soon, because our networks are undergoing a profound transition. The ways we communicate and connect are evolving fast. At the turn of the millennium, we had roughly 200 million switched access lines, or traditional phone lines. By the start of this year, we had only 96 million. On top of that, we had 42 million VoIP lines, an increase of nearly 80% since 2008. Add to this the fact that more than 1 in 3 households have cut the cord and only uses a wireless phone, and you get a sense of the change that is roiling our communications markets. Let's also approach the IP transition with our eyes firmly on the future, but informed by the essential values of the past. As I have long suggested, there are 4 basic values in communications law: public safety, universal access, competition, and consumer protection. I am pleased to see that these fundamental values are part of this presentation today. They absolutely should guide us as we move ahead and navigate this transition. So thank you to the chairman for making these issues a priority. Thank you also to the Technology Transitions Policy Task Force, that is a mouthful, for your work to date. I look forward to the upcoming order and to the new ideas this effort will yield. Because with the IP transition, if we want to think outside of the box, the best place to start is the sandbox.
And thank you, Commissioner, for laying out those 4 principles, which didn't go lost on the task force, and wasn't exactly an immaculate conception on their part. So thank you very much. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into the meat of my statement, I just wanted to make 2 observations. First, much ink, I would expect, will be spilled on the occasional disagreements that we have up here on the dais, but I certainly hope that that attention does not obscure the fact that we agree on much, much more, most notably the need to address the IP transition. And I commend and salute you, Mr. Chairman, for tackling what is one of the most fundamental network revolutions of our time. The issues are not easy, as the presentation has made clear, but for the FCC to ignore some of those challenges, I think, would not serve us or consumers well. I also want to thank and salute the members of the task force. We are so fortunate to have the benefit of so much wisdom in this group. I mean, just at the table alone, to have the benefit of somebody like John with experience with startups on the wireless and cable side, someone like Julie who has got deep expertise on wireline issues, with Henning who co-designed the session initiation protocol, which allows voice and other applications to travel over IP networks. And, of course, with our interim director, John Sallet, who obviously combines eloquence with expertise. Those boots were made for talking, and I think it's appropriate that you are our general counsel going forward. And to everyone else who's participated in the task force, I mean, this has gone beyond, I think, what anyone could have expected in terms of a real agency dedication to the great task at hand. And speaking of that task, it's indisputable, as my colleague Commissioner Rosenworcel has pointed out with the statistics, that the IP transition is happening. Millions of consumers have fled the copper networks of the 20th century for 21st century technologies like interconnected VoIP and 4G LTE mobile broadband. Indeed, almost 1 in 7 American households with a traditional access line dropped it in 2012 alone. Just think about what a fundamental shift that is, given that this technology had endured for the better part of a century. So it's fair to say that time division multiplex services over copper landlines are becoming a bit like VCRs or typewriters, once almost ubiquitous, but now an outdated holdover to some extent, given better alternatives. And so that's why I was pleased last month when Chairman Wheeler announced that, quote, now is the time to act on the IP transition. I could not agree more. That's why I'm pleased to hear today's report from the FCC's task force on the transition. And that's why I'm especially pleased with the recommendation that the Commission move forward in January with targeted experiments, including an all-IP pilot program. Back in March, when I called for the Commission to move forward with this proposal, I stated, and I still believe now, that conducting voluntary all-IP trials in a discrete set of wire centers will help consumers, carriers, and ultimately the Commission itself see what happens when the PSTN goes dark and all IP networks take their place. And that is especially the case, as Mr. Sallet suggested, if we choose a set of trials that will reflect the true geographic, demographic, and other diversity of this country. It is critical for us to make sure that all communities in this country are studied. To borrow from John, I hope these experiments will, quote, help separate the evidentiary wheat from the rhetorical chaff when it comes to the IP transition. For if, as our former colleague Blair Levin has said, an experiment is worth 1,000 pleadings, we will gain valuable insight indeed. So once again, I want to thank all of the staff for all of their hard work over the past many months, reviewing the record already developed in this proceeding and putting together today's presentation. I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labors next month, and I am eager to work with my colleagues and others around the country to ensure that American consumers realize the full benefits of the IP transition in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly, and I understand you may have some questions you want to ask the group.
I do. Thank you.
Great.
Many thanks to the staff for this presentation. The truth is IP is already happening, and we are well engaged in an IP revolution. One policy point, I support trials as a way to understand the future of communications and related public policy issues, as long as the trials do not interfere with the positive marketplace changes and transitions that are already underway. We also can't allow trials to go on too long. So I had some questions of the panel, and I think Jonathan's going to help me out here, give me a little more clarity. Do you agree with me that any trials must be run in parallel with regular FCC proceedings, that we aren't freezing existing rules for the duration of the trials?
Well, thank you for the question and the chance actually to have this public dialogue. In your congressional testimony this morning, you said you were supportive of the task force's efforts so long as the Commission does not allow the trials to lead to delay or inaction. We appreciate your support, and we support your conclusion.
Good.
So what we plan to do is to include the following principles in that draft order that will be presented to you. First, as I've said before, there will be a speedy process for submission, comment, and Commission action on the first round of experiments, and a similar timeline for those that follow. Secondly, the experiments will permit the FCC and the public, as Henning has described them, these are to be open data experiments, to learn as the experiment proceeds by monitoring, measuring, and analyzing as we go along. In other words, an experiment doesn't have to reach a finish line to contribute to the Commission's learning. We will learn as we go. To that end, we will very specifically instruct sponsors of experiments to offer a timeline for initiation and conclusion of experiments. That timeline will be part of the submission to the Commission. It will be subject to public comment, and it will, of course, be considered by the Commission when it authorizes such experiments. So we feel in this way we will be meeting your goal of moving forward without adding to delay or inaction.
Okay, I think you answered a number of my questions all in one big swoop, which is fair, and I appreciate that. Actually, I would only ask one question, and I apologize because I didn't previously give this to the panel. It's not a complex one. When I talk to folks about IP layering, and Henning, you might be able to help me on here. When people talk about that, sometimes my conversation has gotten to like a 5 or a 7 layered internet. You spoke of a 3 layered in your colored, the meat of the presentation, and I apologize for not giving you this question. I just thought of it. Do you have a better feel on whether it's 3, 5, 7? What's the right layer? Can you? And I'm not trying to sandbag you here.
You've just stepped into an age-old debate,
yes.
which has fueled many a late-night beer-supported discussion.
Well, I can't sponsor you there. Okay.
Which I unfortunately cannot offer here. Indeed, for the sake of simplicity, I had focused on the key layers in that. Indeed, the Internet architecture generally, as you rightfully pointed out, is generally abstracted into 5 layers that offer more detail at the engineering level. The ones that are most likely to be affected, however, are roughly the 3 that I alluded to. And indeed, the traditional model is the 7-layer model that was foundational to the pre-Internet days. So it really depends on how you look at it. The important piece, however, is to note what layers provide is a way of separating concerns.
That's right.
And in that sense, the number probably matters less than having clearly defined concerns where competition, public safety, performance, and other consumer issues are affecting different layers, however sliced, differently. So We are not in any way tied to that layer for regulatory or experimental purposes. We see them as one way of explaining things in different ways. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. And again, I apologize that it just came up to me, and I appreciate your expertise on this matter. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Let me see if I can highlight and summarize here for you. Traditionally, there are 7. He's got them down to 5, but now he got it down to 3, and it's a significant.
This is the lawyer version.
Exactly.
I'm not a lawyer.
Perfect, Kenny. I have a statement for the record, and I'm sensitive to the clock on the wall, and won't reiterate the points that we all recognize about the importance of the IP transition. But I do feel that it would be inappropriate to move on again without recognizing again Chairwoman Clyburn for bringing this along and passing it off to us, and the job that Jonathan and Julie and Henning have done long before the new kids arrived on the block, and John is one of the new kids for kicking things off. And the other person who I hope is in the audience here who played so much of an important role in this is Sean Lev. I see Sean sitting back there. Sean, thank you for your leadership on this group. And thanks to the National Institute for Aging Deputy Director Dr. Marie Bernard. We're grateful to see you here, and I look forward to exercising our writing hands together in a moment, because what you're doing is really helping us take an initial step and then work with us on a lot of stuff that's to come after that. So thank you very much. Madam Secretary, would you please announce the next item?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, last on your agenda today is a presentation by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau with an update on FCC and industry efforts to promote mobile wireless device unlocking.
And should we note that Roger Sherman has ducked out for the second time in the day, okay, to avoid. Jim, are you leading the charge here?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Yes, I am also not Roger Sherman. Rest assured, John Leibovitz and I have not effected a coup. You will have your bureau chief back. But in the meantime, we're happy and pleased to announce a voluntary agreement on cell phone unlocking. As you know, the issue was brought to the fore by a citizen's petition on the White House website that received 114,000 signatures. FCC staff has been working with stakeholders on this issue since March of this year to promote more consumer-friendly policies on device unlocking. The agreement today is among the top 5 providers of mobile wireless services: Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and U.S. Cellular, which together cover about 94% of all mobile wireless subscribers. We believe this agreement represents a very positive step forward for consumers of mobile wireless services. Joining me at the table today to give a quick overview of the agreement is Michael Jansen, legal advisor to the Wireless Bureau Chief, and Pramesh Jobamputra, who's an economist in the Spectrum and Competition Policy Division in the Wireless Bureau. With that, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Clyburn, Commissioner Rosenworcel, Commissioner Pai, and Commissioner O'Reilly. I am pleased to provide you with an overview of device unlocking and to review the agreement that is being announced today. Some providers install software that locks their devices to their networks. Unlocking a device allows consumers to move their device from one network to another compatible network if they choose to do so. The unlocking process varies by device and carrier. Some carriers automatically unlock a device after certain conditions are met. Some carriers provide customers with unlocking instructions upon request, and some carriers perform the unlocking process in-store. The unlocking agreement being announced today includes 6 standards and an implementation schedule. First, disclosure. Providers will post a clear and concise policy on postpaid and prepaid unlocking on their website. Second, postpaid unlocking. For postpaid devices, providers will unlock devices or provide unlocking instructions for customers and former customers in good standing and individual owners of eligible devices after the completion of their service agreements, device financing plans, or payment of an early termination fee. Third, prepaid unlocking. Providers, upon request, will unlock prepaid devices no later than 1 year after initial activation, consistent with reasonable time, payment, or usage requirements. Fourth, notice. Carriers will clearly notify customers that their postpaid devices are eligible for unlocking at the time when their devices become eligible, or automatically unlock those devices remotely without additional fee. Carriers reserve the right to charge a reasonable fee to non-customers, non-former customers for unlocking requests. For prepaid customers, carriers will notify customers either at the point of sale, at the time of eligibility, or through a clear and concise statement of the policy on the carrier's website. Fifth, response time. Carriers will fulfill unlocking requests, provide unlocking instructions, initiate an unlocking request to the device manufacturer, or provide an explanation of denial within 2 business days, or explain why the carrier reasonably needs additional time to process the request. Sixth, deployed personnel. Carriers will unlock devices for deployed military personnel in good standing upon provision of deployment papers. In addition, carriers reserve the right to decline unlocking requests if they have a reasonable basis to believe the request is fraudulent or the device is stolen. For the implementation schedule, carriers will adopt 3 of the 6 standards within 3 months and all of the standards within 1 year. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Pramesh Jobanputra, who will discuss monitoring of the unlocking agreement going forward and consumer education on this issue.
Thank you. We'll be monitoring this agreement going forward to ensure that consumers benefit fully from the provisions laid out today. We'll be particularly attentive to the clarity of consumer notifications, response times for unlocking requests, and any fees charged to non-customers for unlocking requests. The FCC has a strong interest in ensuring that consumers are fully informed about device unlocking. We recognize that this can be a technical issue that may confuse some consumers. After further consultation with industry and consumer groups, we will release detailed materials to the public. We're available for answers that you may have.
Thank you to all of you. Commissioner Claiborne.
CTIA, the 4 largest wireless nationwide carriers, and U.S. Cellular have voluntarily committed to pro-consumer cell phone unlocking policies, and I wish to affirm how pleased I am and to commend those carriers that demonstrated leadership on this issue by adopting unlocking policies long before today's announcement. I am confident that others will follow. Wireless carriers should be able to enforce their valid consumer contracts, but I also believe that the provisions in those contracts need to be grounded in common sense. Consumers who satisfy the terms of their contracts should not be subject to criminal and civil penalties if they want to take their device to a new carrier. 114,000 people have spoken. And I applaud Chairman Wheeler for sending a letter that emphasized his support for a policy that included the consumer's rights to be informed about unlocking eligibility. It was also great to see that the industry additionally committed to unlock phones sold to prepaid customers no later than 1 year after initial activation, consistent with reasonable usage requirements. I would like to thank all of you, Michael Jansen, Pramesh Jobanputra, for the presentation, and again, congratulate the chairman on a day well spent.
Commissioner Rosenworth.
Yeah, it's a long day. I'm looking forward to that beer summit we're going to have on internet architecture. We are a nation with more wireless phones than people. Many of us count on our mobile phones to do so much more than communicate through voice calls. We download our whole lives into our handheld digital devices. No wonder they are always in our pockets, in our purses, and on our persons. So earlier this year, many of us were taken aback when a long-standing interpretation of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was changed. The Librarian of Congress determined that going forward, it would be unlawful for consumers to unlock their mobile phones and take them with them when they want to switch wireless providers. That means that simply taking your wireless phone to another network could subject you to criminal penalties or even jail. There is a lot that can be said about this decision. For starters, I think that is one powerful librarian. I also think this new approach does not make sense, because if you have a mobile device, want to unlock it, and you are not bound by a service contract, you should be able to use it on another network. That makes our markets for wireless service more competitive, and that benefits consumers. So today we announced that working with wireless providers, we have forged an agreement that will provide consumers with clear notice of their right to request unlocking on their prepaid and postpaid devices. I am especially pleased that the agreement gives deployed service members the ability to use unlocked phones to stay in touch with loved ones back home. This also complements the Service Members Civil Relief Act, which allows those who serve to suspend or cancel long-term wireless contracts without penalties or fees. Overall, this is an agreement I support, and I thank the chairman for bringing it to our attention and making it part of our meeting today.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before 2013, as my colleague has pointed out, you didn't need anyone's permission to take the phone that you had bought and paid for to another provider's network. You could simply unlock your phone yourself. But then the Librarian of Congress decided to solve a problem that frankly didn't exist, putting formerly innocuous conduct in the crosshairs of copyright law. Consequently, as ridiculous as it sounds, American consumers can face jail time for unlocking their cell phones. For consumers, today's agreement on wireless device unlocking is a half step forward. Industry-wide adoption of these guidelines should make the unlocking process easier to navigate. But this agreement does not solve many of the problems resulting from the Librarian of Congress's decision. It does not empower consumers to unlock phones themselves, but instead keeps carriers in control of the process. If a consumer forgets to unlock his cell phone before recycling it, carriers can still charge that new legal owner an unlocking fee. If a consumer needs to travel abroad for business or to visit his family, he cannot get low rates from a foreign provider without his domestic carrier say so. And if a low-income consumer thinks that his prepaid plan doesn't have a contract, apparently his carrier can make him wait a year before unlocking the phone. Most importantly, today's agreement does not resolve the fundamental problem with federal law. No matter what we do here at the FCC, we cannot ourselves exempt unlocking cell phones or other wireless communications devices from the constraints of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Only Congress can do that. There are ongoing bipartisan efforts in the U.S. House and Senate to pass a permanent fix to that law. Starting 9 months ago, I have voiced consistently my support for those efforts. So too has a diverse coalition, including Tech Freedom and Public Knowledge. I hope that today's industry agreement will help expedite that legislative process. I want to thank Michael Jansen, Pramesh Durman-Putra, and Roger Sherman for putting together today's presentation. I look forward to monitoring the impact of this industry agreement as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
I want to thank the staff for the presentation, very helpful, and my colleagues for their good work on this issue. That's it.
I love your statements.
I'm happy to share with you how to do so.
Taking a page from the wise counsel of my colleague, Mr. O'Reilly, I'll just say this is the way things should work. Congratulations to this team that made it happen. Thank you to Steve Largent and the CTIA in the industry. This is the seesaw rule in action. and thank you to all of you. Is that okay, Mike? Is that close enough?
Appreciate it.
Okay. Now, this is the part of the meeting where we go to various announcements. And I'm going to assume that I can read the minds of my colleagues up here, which is something I've also demonstrated I am not good at frequently, and ask Sean Lev to come up here and assume his position, the appropriate position here at the end. We can thank the folks from the Wireless Bureau for their help and ask Sean to come up. Many have thought that it was a cutout that was sitting at the end of the table posing as general counsel over the years, but it was this gentleman, Sean Lev. And Sean, all of us are so grateful to you for the leadership that you have shown, the contributions you have made, the sacrifices you have made, and I'm sure that my colleagues here would want to comment on that. Commissioner Gleiber.
Sean, your in-depth knowledge of the law and counsel was invaluable. Your preparation and focus on the oral argument, if I could say that, it's a long day. Oral argument for the Open Internet case was truly a testament to your commitment to public service. We will miss you. We will miss your wise counsel, your leadership, and most of all, we will miss you as a friend. The best to you.
Thank you, Sean, for your service. You have always been so charitable with your time with me. Your willingness to explain appellate challenges to someone who does not regularly dwell in a courtroom or dwell much in the complexities of litigation is something I really, really appreciate. No matter how many times I wanted to kick the tires in your arguments, you did not drive away. So thank you very much. Wish you all the best for what's to come.
Commissioner Pai.
Sean, as you know, you have the second most challenging job in the Office of General Counsel, the most challenging being the Deputy General Counsel in charge of the Administrative Law Division. But I want to thank you for your service to the Commission. It is an exceptionally difficult task to handle both the breadth and depth of work that comes through the Office of General Counsel, but you did that with aplomb. You advised the Chairman and the Commissioners very well. And not that you need it, but I wish you all the best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
I want to say, while our time was short, I do appreciate your counsel. It was very helpful. Thank you for your service to the American people. The only other comment I will make is that even in your closing days, you were giving me expert advice. When I offered, how can I help you in your future endeavors, you said, you can't.
He was also the Chief Ethics Officer, right?
So I appreciate your guidance to the closing days. Thank you so much.
Sean, as everybody has said it, wise counsel, effective leadership, standard of excellence, great public servant. We're grateful to you for everything that you've done for so long, and thank you. And we all salute you. And you look good sitting there, you know.
You can get the cutout.
Hey.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Are there other announcements?
Thank you so much. I know it's been a long day, but I could not leave here today without recognizing a few people. Though it took some convincing, I was so glad when Sarah Weitzel agreed to be my media advisor during the transition. Sarah, if you would stand up, if you... Yes, yeah, Bill didn't call you back in. Okay, thank you. Sarah, as you know, has extensive knowledge of the media issues, and with her help, we were able to move and advance a variety of media issues, including foreign ownership, CVAA, LPFM, and we caught up on the video competition report, and so much more. Sarah has returned to the Media Bureau as Deputy Bureau Chief, but I look forward to working with her in the days ahead. Thank you so very much. David Valdez came to my office midway through my tenure as acting chair, but he hit the ground running. A great asset to the office, he played a key role in helping to prep for my Senate appropriations hearing and would pitch in with any project at the last minute with a smile. He was under the radar a lot of the times, but he was truly a player in the office. He, of course, is in the Wireless Bureau right now, and I look forward to working with him in his new role. So this one's going to be a little difficult for me. Words cannot express how much Dave Grimaldi, my former chief of staff and media advisor, means to me and has meant to the office. He served with us from September 2010 until last month. And from my first day, my goodness, I knew we were going to be friends forever. You greatly elevated this commissioner. You greatly elevated the quality of work in our office. You are an outstanding policy strategist, a consummate diplomat. The only thing that bugs me about you is the fact that you seem to be addicted on Google Maps. I am directionally challenged. And when I would ask Dave how to get someplace, he'd be like, come here, Commissioner, look at this on Google. That drives me absolutely crazy. So what I started doing was I would leave the office, get in the car, point my car in a certain direction. Then I would call him so I wouldn't have to go through the Google Map thing. But anyway, that is my absolute only fault with you. You are already missed. We, of course, wish you the best. You are just you are the most, I think, liked individual in D.C. I mean, seriously, everybody knows Dave. Everybody likes Dave. Dave. But seriously, you are one of a kind. We love you and we miss you. And that brings me to my last announcement. As you probably know, my new media advisor and chief of staff is Adonis Hoffman, a very much known quantity in this space. He has Capitol Hill and law firm experience. He served on the subcommittee staff of the House of Foreign Affairs in the 80s and 90s. He joined the Council of the International Bureau here in the late 90s. He was deputy chief of the Cable Bureau, late 90s and early 2000s. And I could go on and on, including he worked with Chairman Kennard with the Interagency Working Group. He is an adjunct professor at Georgetown and just an all-around good guy. Thank you so much for joining our office and continuing the good work that Dave put, and Sarah, of course, brought to the agency and this commissioner. So again, thank you so very much and welcome. And Dave.
All right. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Holly Sauer, who spent some months with me in my office as interim media legal advisor. She has uncommon legal skill and an absolutely encyclopedia-like knowledge of what goes on in the Media Bureau at this agency. The Media Bureau is lucky to have her. And I was lucky for some period of time to call her a colleague, and I'm luckier still to call her a friend. Now, in Holly's wake, I want to announce a new policy director, and that is Clint Odom. We took, or actually stole, Clint Odom from the office of Senator Bill Nelson of Florida, where he served as deputy legislative director, and I dearly hope that the senior senator from Florida will talk to me one day again. But in any event, serving for Senator Nelson, Clint worked on everything involving communications on the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, as well as issues involving the Finance Committee, the Budget Committee, Armed Services, and Aging. Among his efforts on the communications front, he worked with Senator Nelson to introduce and pass legislation protecting consumers from fraudulent caller ID practices. Now, before joining the staff of the United States Senate, Clint worked at Verizon. He also served as a legal advisor to former FCC Chairman Bill Kennard. He also worked at the law firm of Dalonis, and he clerked for the U.S. District Court Judge Henry Wingate of the Southern District of Mississippi. So it is terrific to welcome Clint back to these halls. And he is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Law School and Louisiana State University. So if you hear the Zydeco music on the 8th floor, you'll know the Raging Cajun it's coming from. Welcome, Clint. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Mr. Pai?
Mr. Chairman, I do have an announcement, not so much about personnel as a person, and that person is you. It is no small matter either as an issue of politics or policy to announce a change in course, certainly not least in the context of a congressional hearing. And so it is with gratitude, then, that I want to thank you for your announcement this morning with respect to the quantile regression analysis benchmarks that were adopted as part of the 2011 USF transformation order. Despite the fact that those benchmarks have been in place for 2 years, I can tell you that they have still roiled the industry with uncertainty, chilling investment across rural America, and impeding the deployment of broadband. And so I think that your announcement will help end that uncertainty. It's the right thing to do, especially since those benchmarks don't save the fund a dollar. And I do hope that this announcement augurs the prioritization of making next-generation technologies deployment to all of our nation's citizens more common. And I look forward to working with you and the rest of our colleagues in the Bureau to ensuring that remains the case. So thank you for your leadership.
Mr. O'Reilly?
No comments.
With that, Madam Secretary, would you like to tell us what happens next?
Well, the next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, January 30th, 2014.
With that, if there's no further items up here, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Today was an important day for consumer choice, and we have to look at the events of today through that kind of a prism. Consumers win when they're armed with the right information and know their options, especially when it comes to navigating how to unlock a wireless phone after completing a contract. Today's commitment by wireless providers will provide consumers with more information about when and how to move their devices from one network to another compatible network, should they decide to do so. And we at the Commission stand ready to help consumers understand what these new policies are in partnership with the industry. I expect that this agreement will be incorporated into CTI's Code of Conduct for Wireless Providers, which serves as an important expression of the compact between the industry and the public. I keep talking about network compact. This is part of that. On another topic, this morning I spoke with Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox. We had an excellent conversation about the in-flight issue, and we agreed that the FCC's sole role is to examine the technical feasibility of the use of mobile devices in flight. And the Secretary agreed that the Department of Transportation's responsibility as part of the Aviation Consumer Protection Authority that it has is to determine if allowing calls is fair to consumers. I've talked to you a lot about my opinions as a frequent flyer. I look forward to using my mobile device in flight to check emails, to send texts, to surf the web. And I certainly empathize with those who don't want to be stuck listening to loud conversations in flight. But government is working, has worked. Both of our agencies are doing what we each individually are chartered to do. And that means opening a comment period to get people's feedback in the areas over which we have responsibility. As you know, dozens of countries around the world already permit their use, and airlines have taken advantage of this new flexibility in systems that they offer. It's not uncommon for an aircraft company or airline to program the new system to allow texting, email, and web services but not voice calls. So what we're doing meshes together as a part of each of our responsibilities inside the federal government. Now I'll be happy to take your questions. Paul.
Paul Kirby with TR Daily. Commissioner Rosenworcel said she voted for the NPRM, but she said she won't vote for final rules to allow voice communications. So you don't have a third vote for that. Secondly, you said that if you didn't vote for this item, the rules, you would vote for rules, people would not be able to text or email in the cabin, but they can do that now without your rules and have been doing it.
No. They can do it now with Wi-Fi. They can't do it now on their cell phones, with mobile spectrum.
All right. And then the first question?
This is a comment, okay? You've been around a long time. How do comment periods work? You learn everything, and then you put them together in a final report and order. And I think we will all learn a lot in that process. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. This morning at the
Whenever
hearing today, whenever
it's
the
been a
happened.
long
Yeah,
day.
It's been
Lynn.
a long day. You were asked about the Title II proceeding, and you'd said that there was no rush to address that until the court acted. So do you contemplate that once the court does rule on the open internet rules, that you'll then decide whether the
No, I think you're putting words in my mouth, when you're characterizing it that way.
Okay.
What I said is that we will look at the whole panoply of the commission's authority, and it's about to be it's about to be interpreted by the court. And so obviously everything relates to everything else, but I don't think there was anything specific in terms of timeline specifically with regard to Title II.
Hi, Chairman. Gautam Nagesh with the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, Gautam.
Hi. Obviously, this proposal has generated a lot of feedback. I know even my inbox has been filled with comments on this, so I guess the question is, did you anticipate this sort of reaction to the cell phones on the planes issue, and has that influenced at all sort of your support for the FAA subsequently banning voice calls? In other words, are the comments influencing your views?
I think I've said from day one that I don't like the idea of somebody next to me yapping away on the phone. The issue that happened is that this is a complex technological issue, and we never stopped and said, time out, here's how it works. Time out, here's how it works. Okay? So what exists today is a, let me back up. Your cell phone has multiple power levels in it that we're never aware of it. But in order to save battery life, the cell phone is saying, what's the closest antenna I can communicate with, and how can I lower my signal strength down so it's just enough to get to there? When you take off and you're flying at 20,000 feet or 35,000 feet or whatever, the phone ramps up to full power and tries to reach down through that distance. And at some levels, in fact, can reach down to that distance and cause interference with the terrestrial network. What the airlines around the world have been doing is installing picocells in the airplane that force the cell phone's power down to its minimum amount, which is less than a watt, which means that there's no way that it gets to the ground, which means there's no way it can interfere. So, one, if that equipment isn't there and the phone will still do maximum power to go to the ground, that's still banned. And the ban extends across all frequencies, because it didn't used to cover PCS frequencies and other things, which was an oversight. Mm-hmm. If, however, there is a picocell that has the phone dial back its power so that it can't interfere, then it doesn't interfere. And if it doesn't interfere, then the reason for an interference regulation doesn't exist. That picocell service, that ability to use your mobile device not on Wi-Fi frequencies, but on traditional cellular frequencies, which is to Paul's point here, is an important opportunity for consumers. We're used to doing it on the ground. We should be able to do it in the air. But if this rule isn't changed, that won't be possible. So what we're saying is, okay, here's the technology that says it doesn't go to the ground to interfere anymore. Then there are 4 things you can do. You can text, you can email, you can web surf, you can talk. The Department of Transportation has said, okay, thank you, FCC. You've dealt with the technical issue of whether or not there's interference and therefore whether or not it can be used on the plane. We'll deal with the aviation issue associated with making calls. And so the whole thing kind of parses out like that, but it kind of came at everybody before that parsing was done, and I think that's the reason for some of the confusion that's existed.
Hi, Chairman Matthew Schwartz from Communications Daily.
Hi, Matthew.
This morning at the congressional hearing, you were asked about doing something more on special access. You stated you're currently recused. I'm just wondering if you were referring specifically to the AT&T tariff request, to the special access proceeding in general, why you're recused, and if that's going to be lifted at some point.
So I am currently recused from the tariff issue, and I would suggest that you ought to talk to John Sallet, the general counsel, to go into the details of the whole thing.
But just from the AT&T tariff issue?
Currently.
Okay.
So we can talk about that. Hi, Elena.
Hi.
I don't hear you.
I'm not texting.
Okay. Speak up. Hi, Elena.
Hi, Alina Selyuk with Reuters. I was going to ask you how you feel about competition, but I'm not going to do that.
I'm glad you asked. Competition.
On cell phone.
I'm sorry, that was your question. Next question.
On cell phone unlocking, would you be interested in pursuing possibly some sort of review of rules on unlocking during the contract? And have you heard any feedback from the White House on the whole ordeal today?
The whole ordeal today?
That was a word choice. The whole announcement today.
The arrangement with the wireless carriers is for after your contract to pay off the phone has terminated. There have been other proposals out there. I think that this is a responsible action on the part of the industry. I think they should be applauded for this. As I said at the end of the meeting, this is the way things should work. I hope it'll be a model for what other industries will be able to step up and do. And as far as I know, this is something that is in keeping with the kind of goals the White House has set, the petition and all this sort of thing.
Well, what about during the contract?
No, I'm saying I think that this is I believe that this is an adequate and important solution.
There's an FCC reform bill moving through Congress. I'm sorry, Brooks Politico.
Hi, Brooks.
There's an FCC reform bill moving through Congress. So explain to me why, in the name of transparency, a majority of the commission should be allowed to meet in secret.
A majority of the commission should be allowed to meet in secret. You mean
one of the provisions of the bill allows 3 of you guys to meet in secret.
So first of all, that's legislation that they're moving. I happen to think that the sunshine provision impacts not only the way the commission works, but the way the joint board and other activities work. And I don't believe that the legislative proposal is quite as you explained it. My recollection is that it has to be bipartisan and that there needs to be counsel present.
But still, that means that a majority of the commission would be able to meet in secret instead of in public, and it's done in the name of transparency.
You need to talk to the sponsors about it. But
Do you think a majority of the commission needs to meet in secret?
So it's an interesting thing. So I had a couple of commissioners to my house for dinner the other night. I know, Paul. It was you didn't. I'm surprised you didn't get your invitation, huh? Well, that explains the empty seat. That explains the whole thing, and it was a social evening, and we had the general counsel there to supervise the fact that we could talk about the Michigan-Ohio State game. There are some. It's not quite always the black and white, I think, that you've identified here, Brooks. Next. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields, Bloomberg News. Last Friday, your media bureau wrote to Sinclair taking issue with some of the shared services arrangements or local marketing area arrangements. I lose the terminology. Where's that issue going at the FCC? What do you intend to do with those intra-market arrangements by TV stations that some have questioned?
Well, I think that the Bureau is appropriately asking questions about whether or not SSAs and JSAs affect ownership calculation decisions they have to make. And I think it's the right kind of question to ask.
Have you reached a conclusion? Should they be tightened up?
We're looking forward to their response. Yeah.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Bryce Basham, Bloomberg BNA.
Hi, Bryce.
In your opinion, what right do consumers have to privacy with regard to their cell phone information?
The reality of IP networks, the reality of big data, and the impact of that on consumers is one of the vexing issues that presents itself as a result of this IP transition, of the fact that we're going to an all data world where we all leave our digital footprints behind. I think that privacy is a serious issue. I think that privacy will be an issue that will be increasingly discussed. This agency has had a role in telecommunications service privacy in the past. And as we move to information service, I think it's a legitimate question to ask, is there authority? If so, what is what should be the policy? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.